Welcome, folks. As you're signing in, feel free to give a shout in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We'll get started in just a moment.
People signing in should know that it's going to be 99 degrees here today. So take off your shoes, get comfortable.
Feeling it here in Portland, that's for sure. I'm already barefoot.
Said I have shoes on. Jeez.
It is going to cool down tonight, though. It's still the Willamette Valley.
Thank God.
Yeah, 2 once-in-a-thousand-year heat domes in the same summer would seem a little strange.
It would.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that the other day. Say, well, you just got to understand it's 2,000 years right back to back, and we're right in the middle of those 6.
Right. In the trough.
Get it out of the way for another 1,000 years, I think.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Dream on.
The scary thing has been from my house here, I have a pretty panoramic view of all the wheat fields and grass fields. And I have watched 2 combine or baler-based fires start in the fields below me.
Ooh.
Already this year. Quickly extinguished, although one of them burned about 60 acres. But it's like, really, guys, you can't be a little more careful?
Yeah.
Especially on a hot day like today. Yeah.
Yeah. No more gender reveal parties, people. All right, let's get started. All right, everyone, welcome to Preview Week for Willamette, the Pinot Noir auction. The 2019 Willamette Valley wines featured in this tasting series are exclusive small lot bottlings for our wine trade auction. If you don't know about the auction and you'd like to learn more about how to purchase these wines, contact Emily at the WVWA, and I put her email address in the chat. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our auction sponsors for their ongoing support. And a very big thank you to our Imperial sponsor, Winebow. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Representing lot number 61, James Rahn of Abbey Road Farm. Representing lot 62, Moss Bittner of Landlines Estates. Representing lot number 63, Guillaume of Résonance. Representing lot 64, John Tomaselli of Torii. Representing lot number 65, Scott Neal of Terre Vineyards. Representing lot 66, Robert Brittan of Brittan Vineyards.
Good morning.
And your moderator for today, Pat Dudley of Bethel Heights. Take it away, Beth. Or Pat, I just called you Beth, my goodness. There's no Beth anywhere. Pat.
Never been Beth before, but it's a good time to start new things. We've been doing that all morning here. Welcome, everybody. I wish we could see you. Really appreciate your joining us today from wherever you are. And I'm happy to say this is a panel of really interesting wine guys. We don't have a woman on this panel, but we've had plenty along the way, so don't be alarmed. We've got a really nice cross section here of AVAs within the Willamette Valley. We have 1 from the Dundee Hills, 2 from Yamhill Carlton, 2 from McMinnville District, and 1 Willamette Valley blend, which is lovely because the Willamette Valley, you might all have heard this too many times already today, but has been, just as of July 16th, granted the status by the European Union of a protected geographical indication. So all the AVAs in the world in the Willamette Valley, still the big one, Elephant Willamette Valley appellation, and we're so proud to be part of that. So we have 1 10K slot today, and that's unusual. I think there maybe are 2 10K slots in the whole auction. So that's a nice opportunity to look out for. The rest of them are 5K slots. And we're just going to start by going around in lot order and ask each of our winemakers to tell us where they're located, how they started, and to really tell us about their wine, how they chose their wine and what it's like. So right into it. Number 61, lot number 61 is the 10K slot in our group today. It's by James Rahn of Abbey Road Farm, and it's called Clos d'Arcel. So tell us about it.
Well, first of all, I've taken a lot of wines to Robert Brittan over the years, and every time he congratulates me with the same words. Congratulations, James, you made a commercially viable wine. So I'm pretty stoked that I have a commercially viable wine for the auction today. This is the Willamette Valley bottling. And two vineyards that I've worked with for a number of years now, especially one, Résonance Vineyard, which is about 2 hours south of here, the very southern tip of the Willamette Valley. Really great marine sedimentary soils. It's a cold site surrounded by old growth forests. Self-rooted, planted in 1982. Just a wonderful, magical place. There's 3 generations of family that live on that site. I bought Pinot Meunier since 2014. And so that's how I was introduced to this plot. So I bought a lot of Pinot Noir from them as well. The other part of the blend is Carlton Hill Vineyard. And Carlton Hill is just about 6 miles due west of where Abbey Road Farm is. David Polite owns and farms that. And those are also sedimentary soils, but there's also a lot of loamy qualities to that soil called pea vine. And so the difference between the two, the fruit that comes off of Résonance always tends to throw really red, really bright aromas. Super floral, some of the best smelling ferments that I've ever smelt. It's just strawberries and cream almost every damn year. So I really love that. And then the counterpoint to that is the Carlton Hill, which is always a more robust sort of black fruit site. It is a little bit brooding. They throw tannins a little bit more than the Résonance. So those are my 2 primary Pinot Noir sites, both for my brand, James Rahn, and Abbey Road Farm. And so this is, like I said, we did 10 cases. We pulled 12 out because we'll be pouring the other 2 cases at the auction next week. Half of this is Carlton Hill, and half of the Carlton Hill block is new oak. So we'll call this 25% new oak in this wine. The other part came from a single barrel of Résonance that just, I think, shined so brightly and was so aromatic. And today is the first day that I've opened it, actually, since we threw it in the bottle about 6 weeks ago. And so if you smell it, you taste it, the first thing that comes across is that bright red fruit, the predictable flowers. They're coming across as violets right now. But then as soon as that dissipates, you have that Carlton Hill come up and bring up the rear. The Carlton Hill also brings up that tannin structure, both from the fruit tannins and the dry barrel tannins that comes from that new wood. To come with a little bit flashy Pinot Noir version, I think. This one was picked for ageability as well. It's just delicious, I think. I think Robert would love this wine too. And that's a little bit about me. I've been making wine since 2013. In 2018, we started Abbey Road Farm, which is an 82-acre site in Carlton Hill. I'm sorry, in Carlton AVA. We have 43 acres under vine and 16 different grape varieties growing. So we do some fun stuff up here. We're very excited about this, and we're super stoked about this Pinot Noir that just made today.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe later you can tell us about your 16 varieties. That's quite intriguing.
I can do
But first, we should keep moving along so we have lots of time for questions at the end. Thank you, James, very much. We're going to move on to lot number 62 with Moss Bittner from Landlines Estate. It's a 5-case lot, and it's called Carlton Ridge. Take it away,
Thank you so
Moss.
much, Julia. I am the viticulturist, the grape grower for Landlines Estate, which you probably haven't heard of because we're brand new, and also for Montanore Estate, which I hope you have heard of. We've been around since the early 80s, and we started biodynamically farming about 20 years ago. So we've got some real experience with that. We purchased the old Merriman Estate, all these estates, crazy. We purchased the Merriman Vineyard in 2016. It had been planted in 1999, so 22 years ago. by Mike Merriman. It's a fantastic site. It's next door to David Polite's Carlton Hill cellars, from which James Rahn is getting his grapes, or some of his grapes. So beautiful site. What's exciting about it in particular is that it's on this ridge here, over here. It's right next to Résonance too. You'll hear a bit from Guillaume later today, later this hour about that area. So awesome site. It's right on the edge of the old lake that was formed when the Missoula floods broke and deposited sediment in the Willamette River Valley. So these are actually Montana soils, as strange as that sounds. They just happen to be living here in Oregon. And they're really exciting. They're not uniform though, because these floods happened episodically every 55 years or so, they say. And so across a vineyard, across even like an acre, you'll see different deposits of from one flood or another. And each of those spots kind of has to be farmed its own way. The grapes might be really vigorous in one spot, and then you go 100 yards down the row, and suddenly not so vigorous anymore. The exciting thing about this site is that in general, like James said, it lends itself to real intensity, even real seriousness, some dark fruit, depth, structure, all of those things. But as we've farmed this piece of land for a few years now, we've started to bring out some of the, I'd say, playfulness in it. Because what happens when you have all those different soils is you kind of have a field blend of soil. We talk about field blends of grapes, different varieties, different clones, but in our case, and I think in a lot of the Missoula flood clay soils in Oregon, what we have is a field blend of soils. So even more exciting. So again, intensity, no doubt about that. Real good tannic structure. So this, although it comes from 3 different barrels, is about 50% new oak, and it's hard to find. It's framed perfectly by the oak, but really what comes across is the fruit and the spice. Some real playfulness. It consists of 3 different clones, 2 different clones, actually, Wadensville and Pomard. Those are kind of the old school heritage clones in Oregon. The Pomard lends itself some real meatiness, some structure, and the Wadensville offers more of like a floral, ethereal, acid-driven character. So the 2 married together, you get some real brightness and joy, I think. So I was out there this morning in the blocks that this was harvested from. It's on the western flank of the vineyard, and remarkably stays cool during the morning, and then actually stays cool a little bit in the afternoon too, because at the bottom of that hill is this beautiful bank of fir trees and oaks, just this mixed forest. So a beautiful, joyful sight and a beautiful, joyful wine right here. Bid high, bid often. Come in these little bottles if you sampled it. We've also got these amazing 3-liter bottles, you know, for collectors to celebrate really the launch of this thing. We're not always going to make these gigantic bottles, but you know, when we're launching a new thing like we are here, we want to do that. We want to share. And again, bid high, bid often. If you have any questions about Montanore or Landlines, feel free to reach out. We are always willing to host you and to help people in the world at large get to know Oregon wines.
Thank you, Moss. That was very cheerful and upbeat, and that's so great. Thank you. We're going to move right on to lot number 63 now. Guillaume Large at Résonance. Lot number 63 is Sonorité. We'd love to hear about it. Tell us a little bit about where you are and when you started, and then about your wine.
Yes, thank you, Pat. Good morning, everybody. So Guillaume Large, I am the winemaker of Résonance. Bon, as you can see, my Oregonian accent is still a little bit strong because I moved from France, from Burgundy, you know, in 2017 to follow up the project of Résonance, to plant Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on a beautiful property in Carleton, western side of Carleton, because, you know, Résonance started in 2013, the project of the Maison Louis Jadot in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, and this is the first time that Jadot is making wine with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay outside of Burgundy. The first time from the foundation of Jadot in 1859. And you know what is interesting? 1859, the same year, it was the foundation of the state of Oregon. So the first good link, a first good sign between the two wine regions. Voilà. So 2013, Jacques Lardière, who was the winemaker of the Maison Jadot during 42 vintages from 1971 to 2012. Beginning of 2013, he was a young retired man, and so he was available to visit the Willamette Valley with the idea to find a place, a location, a terroir. And he visited Résonance Vineyard, a beautiful small vineyard of 20 acres, planted from 1981, ungrafted Pinot Noir at the foot of the Coast Range. Voilà, and a place, really the seed of our project. So we decided to start the adventure here in the Willamette Valley. And so we love this name, Résonance Vineyard. So we decided to keep Résonance as the name of the brand, as the name of the project, of the winery. Just we add the accent on the E for a small link with Burgundy. And voilà, that was the beginning of the adventure. So today you will test barrel selection from the oldest Pinot of Résonance Vineyard. We choose the name Sonorité as for us means a lot, you know, sonorité, like sonority, so the link, a little bit the sound between the two wine regions, Burgundy and Willamette Valley, the sound, like the echo between the vineyard and the coast range. Voilà, bon, a lot of meaning for this word, but most important maybe the wine itself. So as I told you, planted in 1981, so 40 years old this year. And imagine the depth of the roots that are already bringing a lot of complexity, a part of the minerality of the place into the wine, because this vineyard has been planted on one of the ancient marine sedimentary soil. So a lot of layers of sediment that give really something special. And important for us as well, the cultivation, so the work in the vineyard. So the vineyard is certified organic. To do the minimum of things that we have to do. We till the soil, we spray when we need, but the goal is really to, again, I repeat often, but to express the place, the somewhereness of this location. So voilà, and you will test a lot of black fruit, you know, blackberries, big black cherries. 2019 is a vintage very, very expressive. This is always something that surprises us because voilà, the energy, the vibration of the fruit is amazing. Delicate spices, some violet flower touch, something really coming from the vineyard, from Résonance Vineyard, et puis the structure. Voilà, the tannins, again, the marine sedimentary soil express really the essence of the place. Voilà. So age in barrel, and we have selected one barrel from the forêt de Troncé, nice barrel, and voilà what I can tell you about this wine. Pat
is muted.
Yep.
I'm trying to keep out the noise of the tractor that keeps driving around my house with the spray. Sorry about that. Last spray of the season, we think. So that was very kind of you, Guillaume. We've been up to see your place and it's so beautiful. Thanks for coming to this auction with us. And we're going to move right on to John Tomaselli. His wine is lot number 64. It's a 5-case lot. It's called Chip Off the Old Block. And we would love to hear how you started, when you started, where you are, and especially about your wine.
Sure. Thanks, Pat. Well, it's good to be back here on Auction Preview Week 2020. My name's John. I started here at Torii. I joined the winemaking team in 2006. I've been here ever since, just slowly moving my way up the ranks. This particular wine was made by Jacques Tardy and myself from fruit from Olson Estate Vineyard. Torii was established in 1993, but our vineyard up here on the property was planted in 1972. We're in the Dundee Hills, about 820-foot elevation. Just really beautiful old vines. This particular block, the Old Block, that's where the name came from, Chip Off the Old Block, was originated from the Irie cuttings over that came over in the mid-60s. It's planted as a Massal selection of Pinot Noir. The 2019 vintage, this wine I love. There's a beautiful transparency to, I think, all the 2019s that really let the vineyard kind of show its own personality. This was picked at about 22 bricks on September 28th, which is pretty early for this site, but that's kind of the way things have been in the last few years. Fermented in a 3-ton oak barrique. This is about 50% new oak, which is a little heavy-handed for Torii, but it's really well integrated and it barely shows. It's just framing it up, like Moss said, just framing the picture. I love this wine. I just tasted it this morning. The first time since bottling, and it's just really integrated itself. A beautiful mix of fresh red fruit. I just keep coming back to all our 19s. The word fresh just keeps coming up. Real sweet and juicy, concentrated flavors, red cherries, followed by some beautiful herbal notes. The aroma screams Dundee. It's got that dried floral character like lavender and rose petals, followed back behind with that Dundee dust, we kind of call it. That little dusty aromatic that I think is unique to this growing region. The wine itself, nothing that really stands out for me is the texture. It's super soft, without lacking structure. The tannins have really kind of evolved themselves for as young as this wine is. I mean, I'm sure it would benefit from a little barrel age, but it is very approachable right now. But the magic of the wine really comes from the site. The old vines on their old roots, planted in, like I said, in 72. They're just, we're real lucky to have it. We only have about 9.5 acres of those old vines, so not a lot, but we're privileged to still be able to work with those kinds of grapes. Yeah, this wine, a real beautiful representation of the 2019 growing season, which I thought was beautiful. A lot of pretty cool, dry summer. I see you're only about 9 days in the low mid 90s for the entire season, which is quite a bit different than what we're having this year. I just walked through this block this morning. It all looks good, so we're real optimistic about having another good year. But yeah, we love participating in the auction. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to make that wine, make something a little unique for the auction and for you guys out there. I think anybody who has a sample of this or brings it home will really enjoy it. That's really all I got.
And thanks for those words about the 2019 vintage. We haven't talked about vintage very much today so far, but it might be a good topic to swing around back to after we hear from two more winemakers. Our next presenter is Scott Neal from Terre Vineyard, and it's lot number 65, Fleur de la Coeur. Let's hear about it.
All right, thanks, Pat. Thanks, Julia. Appreciate you guys having me here, and appreciate everyone supporting WVWA. Great organization. We're doing great things. We appreciate all your support. So it was 23 years ago, my wife and I decided we wanted to get back to farming, and we wanted to, I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, wanted to get back to farming and live on the land and grow Pinot Noir. So in the spring of '98, we were driving around Yamhill County getting lost, saw a for sale sign at the bottom of this 50-acre south-facing hill in the coastal foothills, and bought it that weekend. Moved in on Labor Day, started planting in '99. So our first block ended in '99, and we've kind of slowly planted as we could. We have organically grown our grapes from the outset, really focusing on regenerative agriculture techniques over certainly the last 10 to 12 years, and really trying to, I guess, look at a totality of what we're doing in this ecosystem, this little ecosystem, an area that we're growing grapes and trying to make wines that are really speak of the place. One thing I really find cool about this group is we've got these huge amounts of connections, I think, between the different wineries. So, so far, I think we've had 4 different wineries talk about grapes off the coastal foothills. McMinnville AVA is definitely punctuated by being in the coastal foothills. And that uniqueness and variation of soil, we certainly see that on our property. And we see that in this wine specifically. So what I tried to do with this wine is it's mid-slope wines, about 400-foot elevation on the base, about 460 feet on the top of these 2 blocks. And what they are is they're located on this kind of a bowl. So Abbey's block is one of the blocks named after my oldest daughter, is kind of a south to southwest facing block. Tallulah's Run, which is my other daughter, is on the other face of that slope, facing each other and reflecting off each other. And I always feel like they kind of reflect off each other a little bit like my girls reflect off each other. The reason we called this Fleur de la Coeur was one of the things I did with my girls is we read all these books together. It's kind of like a good night ritual, and we got through with both of them. And if you guys know Harry Potter, Fleur de la Coeur was known as the most beautiful girl in the whole kind of series of the Harry Potter books. And I think of these 2 blocks as being that beautiful, the flower of the heart is where this name came from. So what's cool about these 2 different blocks, even though they're reflecting on these 2 hillsides, is Abbey's block is sedimentary soil and west facing. And Tallulah's Run is more of a volcanic uplifted soil. So it was volcanics that happened before this part of Oregon rose out of the ocean. And it was volcanics that have been pushed up along with the plate tectonics that have created the Coast Range and brought this part of Western Oregon to the surface. So I love the juxtaposition of these 2 different wines because they're very different. As John was talking about, we do a multi-clonal planting as well. Because early on, we determined that what we wanted to focus on our place was not clones, we wanted to focus on place. So we're grafting our own vines. So we grafted these vines in this kind of a cell selection idea and randomly planted these grapes in these different blocks, but they're kind of equally random, if you will. So when you taste Abbey's block versus Tallulah's, what you're tasting is not clone or something else. You're just tasting literally that place and why that translates itself into the bottle. And we really try to make that happen through really pretty minimalistic winemaking. My job is to take these grapes that we work all year to grow and make them really ripe, and to really stay out of their way and just let them kind of translate into the bottle. So that's what I try to do. And so we've been, again, doing this for several years. On the 19s, I find the 19s, I actually haven't tasted this probably in about 6 weeks either. It's kind of interesting, like when you come back to this wine, it's all of a sudden like, wow, I remember why I did this. So what I love about these 2 different blocks is Tallulah's being volcanic and having this kind of, I might have mixed it up. Actually, Tallulah's a little more west facing, Abbey's a little more east facing. Tallulah's Run always has this brightness to it and this lift and this real kind of high energy that's immediate, that comes out in the glass right away. A lot like my little daughter, Tallulah. She's the same way. High energy comes out and shows herself. On the other side, Abbey's block is this more complex, and it has these layers and this stuff that reveals itself over time. Again, like my daughter, Abbey, she's got these huge layers, and you got to get to know her, and reveals herself over time. I remember Robert, who's the next guy who's going to be talking, you might know Robert Brittan, when he first moved here, and the conversations my daughter, Abbey, and him would have, I still remember them, and it's very, very cool, actually, when they're out behind our winery and things. It was pretty interesting. I think they were talking about butterflies and all sorts of different things. It was very interesting, as I recall. But so anyway, I try to translate those energies into this wine. So with the 2019 in the McMinnville AVA, we definitely get tannins, we definitely get structure, we definitely get that dark fruit. But I get that immediately off this wine. That red cherry, that red fruit that comes off of the Tallulahs, and then that darkness and the complexity of the Abbey starts coming in. What I love about 19, that cooler vintage, which we're not experiencing every day. I'm actually, one of my blocks, I just saw a little bit of color change this morning, which was kind of shockingly early. But what you get is this life to it, and this vibrancy, this energy that's coming through in this wine. And I just know with this structure, with this acid level and this beautiful fruit, we're going to have a wine that's going to really develop and age over time. And I'm super excited for this wine in another 5 to 10 years. It's going to be very interesting. So I appreciate you guys bidding on lot 65, bidding high, and taking it home. And I know somebody will enjoy it. So anyway, thanks, and look forward to the questions. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Julia. Can't hear you.
Right. Sorry. Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. And yeah, so many questions are coming to mind, but we're going to have time for that. The way we're going, we're doing great. We're going to round up the first round here with the, I don't want to say notorious, the well-known winemaker, Brittan Vineyards, Robert Brittan, lot number 66. It's called Purple Diamonds. It's a 5K lot. Robert.
Thank you, Pat. And thanks to the rest of the group here today. This is a fun group. I love talking to fellow winemakers. It is one of the absolute best things about making wine in Oregon is we have this incredible, really very tight group of people who are not afraid to share ideas, to support each other, and let's face it, make fun of each other. I mean, come on, where else are you going to be in a group of people where there's this Somm who decided he really had to be a winemaker and he pulls it off. And at the same time, you've got this guy with this incredibly beautiful French accent, which gives him total credibility. I mean, more than I could ever do, having done this for almost 50 years. And he drops like 1859, like it's a normal part of his conversation. I mean, this is like totally, this is just a great group. And I think it's really important that we all understand that this auction is a way that we can support this group and do our job as we need to get this voice of Northern Willamette Valley wines, out there into the world. This is a really important and a big thing. And it's a hell of a lot of fun because the wines are all unique. My own particular wine is a subset of a subset. So on my vineyard, I am incredibly focused on this idea of place, as everyone else who has talked to you today is. It's been a driving passion of mine for probably 30 of the almost 50 years that I've made wine. And what really got me to Oregon was the opportunity to make really absolutely great Pinot Noir on a site where I can make more than one wine from the very same site because of the differences contained within that site. And this particular block that this wine comes from is unique to everything else on the property. So 128 acres, of which we have 30 acres in vines, but they're spread out. And this is a unique little piece that is particularly exposed. So we've all talked a little bit about the climate, about where we all have our grapes. We are in a coastal climate. So we actually are all influenced by the Pacific coast. From my vineyard, I can be on the beach in 45 minutes. And the most significant thing about that is that we are at the mercy and the benefit of these winds that develop, that exchange the air from the coast to the inland valley air. Makes it totally unique. And it allows us the expression of wines that we see across all of our vineyards. On our site, particularly here in the McMinnville AVA, both Scott and I we talk a lot about the winds that come through the Van Duzer. The truth is, both of us we're in a wind shadow. We're a little bit protected from that wind, but much more impacted than, say, John is up in the Dundee Hills. But nonetheless, it impacts all of us. And on our site, it is a huge reason why the wines have the concentration and depth and intensity that they do on this site. So this wine, the Purple Diamonds, is named as it is, mostly because it is actually my wife's engagement ring. So the true story, I conned her into allowing me to plant 3 more acres of Pinot rather than buy her a rock. She's a lot smarter than I am. She just said, appreciating asset, depreciating asset, nah, forget it. We'll take Pinot. So we planted a single selection, and this is also unique to this vineyard. I'm also a big believer in trying to make more complex wines by mixing the genetics of Pinot Noir within the site. So this concept that we talk about in the Massal. By the way, I also just really loved, Mosh, your comment about a field blend of soils. I'd actually never thought of it that way. That's pretty funny, but I would, and kind of charming, really. I also don't know, though, if a winemaker is really allowed to use a word like episodic. I mean, is that like a Scrabble word or something?
I think so. It's I don't know if I have that many letters on my tray, but I usually end up somewhere along the way.
Okay, so episodic, I'm going to use it. I think my wife would claim that I'm episodic, like I create these episodes of crises. The Purple Diamonds lot is a unique planted area on the vineyard. It is a little hill that actually slopes off to the east, so it has an eastern aspect. The rows actually run east-west. All of the rest of the vineyard, or the old planted vineyard, the first of the vineyard, was all planted due north-south because we felt we needed maximum sun exposure in order to even get Pinot Noir mature on this site. I bought the site already planted in 2004. Most of the vines were dead. This is a really difficult place to grow grapes. It had been planted in 2001 and none of the vines were up to stake. So it is dominated by these uplifted ocean sedimentaries, these uplifted ocean marine basalts, and sort of top dressed with land-based basalts. All of this eroded by wind and water, and you get these incredible mixtures. I didn't even mention the ocean sediments. We even have ocean sedimentary soils here too. And so you get this incredible mixture, but on this particular little hill, there is this one expression of geology on this hill. Underlying this little hill is some uplifted, what we call intrusion basalts, very young basalts. Like my Gestalt block, these two areas are pretty unique within the vineyard itself. The fact that it is east sloped is incredibly important, the way it addresses the morning sun. And then this planting of this old selection, which is known as Swan selection, it was originally came out of Joseph Swan's vineyard in Sonoma. And it is in itself a selection of a selection, but it is a unique expression of Pinot Noir that gives a length and a mid palate to this wine that I don't get anywhere else on the site. The wine has a vibrancy to it between the high acidity and the concentration of phenolics that pulls the wine through the palate with this almost sweet silkiness, but in it a vibration of tension, which all of my wines are about structure, they're about texture, they're about tension. And this wine has a beautiful richness to it, a silky prettiness to it, an expression of red fruit that we get that's very different from everything else on the property. And in that, I think it's so appropriate that every time, every year, every vintage, this wine reminds me of Ellen, my wife, for whom this block exists. It's our Cygnus block, the Swan, or the Northern Cross, if you know your astronomy, is up over this block every night this time of the year. It is a really magical place. And I could talk a lot about how mixed up the soils are and how that impacts the site. But let me just talk a little bit more about the wind. The Van Duzer expression, which we all of the members on this call actually deal with one way or another. On my site, it can be particularly violent, not unusual to have with normal winds. Once this damn heat dome disappears again, by about 3 o'clock this afternoon, I would start to get 15-mile-an-hour winds. At about 20, the stomata on the leaf closes so that we can't respire. We actually stop photosynthesis. And the vines actually, the fruit at this time of the year, as we're approaching color change, the most important part of ripening, the vines, the grapes just start to develop in a slower, kind of a slowed down way. We hit a different point of maturity because of the wind. And it's what gives all of the grapes in our area, but particularly on this vineyard, these savory components, which give sort of an added dimension to the fruit in the vines. And it toughens the skins. It gives you a much more intense concentrated wine. And I believe that using the punch in fermentation, so here we go, we take the lid out of a double barrel, put in a half a ton of grapes that are not destemmed. We top dress it with a little bit of destemmed fruit. And then all of the punch downs are done actually by hand. It gives a very different expression of this site and particularly this block. And that's what our lot 66 is. It's a single punch-in fermentation of the Cygnus block here at Brittan Vineyards. We are an estate property. This is also another thing that's incredibly important to me. So my wife and I, we own the property. We grow the grapes and we make the wines. It's all done within our little family. So I hope that you have an opportunity to try the wine. It's absolutely delicious, as are all the wines being offered to you today. And again, I hope that if any of you have questions, that you will reach out now. I mean, we would love to answer your questions now, but we also would be, all of us, every winemaker here would be more than happy to take your questions at a later date. And of course, we can always reach out to Pat Dudley, because Pat Dudley, who has been in the Oregon wine industry her entire life, almost, would be more than happy to direct questions and answer questions as well. So please, if you can't come for the auction, you are joining us via Zoom, please participate and bid on a wine. You won't be disappointed. They're all very, very unique and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, very much. We would love to have questions among the group here, if you have any, and our audience who we can't see, we'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, not seeing any, I have one for you all. We haven't talked very much about vintage today. There have been a few comments, however, that are sort of a lead into what I'd like to ask. We know that all the auction wines are from the 2019 vintage. And so, and last year's auction was all about the 2018 vintage. And you could say those were very different vintages. And I would love to, I've heard some comments among you so far, like Guillaume said, very expressive. John said about 2019, he carried on a little more about it than the rest of you. It was transparency, fresh, and very cool season. And then I just would like to hear you say a little bit about your thoughts on the 2019 vintage as a whole, how it will show early and how it will show later in its life. If you could just say what you think. Of course, we don't know till it's over, but how do you feel about the 20, and compared to 2018, a lot of our buyers will have had, our bidders will have had a chance to try 2018 vintage. So how is this one different? Who wants to go first? Maybe we should make James go first because he was
Absolutely.
Muted.
Thank you. First of all, I learned a long time ago that there's nothing really, there's no such thing as a good year and a bad year. In my opinion, there's an easy year and a slightly more difficult year to make wine. I think in 2018, I think the wines just made themselves. I mean, from a winemaker who doesn't inoculate anything, they just sort of were, ferments were happy, they smelled good, they made themselves. I threw them in a barrel and I opened them up a year later. I mean, it was just so pristine and great. In 19, we had the most idyllic sort of Oregon growing season since I've been up here, since 13. It was moderate. It was, if not just a little bit cool. The challenge came with the rains early. And it's very site specific. And I had some vineyards that were completely unfazed by this. Rainsong is one of those vineyards. And Rainsong's fruit is so impeccable every year that I don't even sort it. I just sort of wave hello when it goes by on the table. And even Carlton Hill was just really good shape. Whereas the Pinot Noir that I made that year was all really great. It was held typicity for Oregon Pinot Noir. It was some of my off varieties that really, really struggled in my team. So, and I make 20 different varieties of wine. So my view of that vintage might be one of much more higher difficulty than I think folks that deal a little bit more on the Pinot Noir side. But like I said, my Pinot Noirs were happy, resilient. The fruit was in great shape. And they were a little bit more expressive in the aromatics, I think, than the 18s. The 18s were a little bit more assertive in their stance. So that's my view of the 2019 vintage compared to 18.
Okay, so who wants to check in on that one next?
I'll dive in. So I think 19 was my 17th vintage on this property. 19 felt a little bit more like kind of the early days, I would say, a little bit, because the summer was certainly cooler, and as James said, that rain. You know, it's interesting, like 2018 was one of those vintages. I'm picking grapes in the sunshine, making wine in my shorts and a t-shirt, and you know, it's kind of a little strange that things are so nice. At Crush, having rain was just the typical pattern that we'd have in the first probably 10 years that I was here. And so it definitely felt more traditional and more historical from when I started. And the wines, I think, come across a little bit more in that historical vein too, with that life and that brightness versus, you know, more rich fruit and you know, bigger wine from like the 18 vintage. I agree. 18 was a piece of cake, right? I mean, you just kind of were there to, you know, if you mess that one up, you're kind of like, maybe you should turn your winemaking card in. Where 19 was definitely more involved. You had to be on the ferments. You had to be making sure that the fruit came in ripe. And we did do a little bit more sorting in 19. So honestly, 19 is a more satisfying vintage for me, because I think just the more effort you kind of inputs you put in, the more you kind of feel that connection to it. I love our 18s; they're delicious. But the 19, again, that vibrancy. I think Pat asked about what we think about the you know, how they are now and how they're going to be as they age. They definitely feel our wine, because that what I love what Robert said about the savory component. That is a McMinn-Villavier kind of signature deal. That's certainly coming through, and I think our wines, because of that phenolic character that we have, they tend to age well. So to me, the 19s definitely feel like they are youthful, but I am super excited in 5 years when that tannin starts integrating and it becomes a little more rounder. It's going to be I know this wine is going to age really well with the density, the acid, and that phenolic load that's in there. So I'm excited about the ageability of this wine.
Guillaume, how about you? You said very expressive about 2019. How do you compare it to 18, for instance?
You know, if I think about 2018, for me that was a vintage, you know, that I will not forget for a few reasons, but at first I think for the quality of the fruit. So that was a season almost perfect, balance, you know, in terms of weather, in terms of condition of ripeness, and that was the first vintage at the new winery that we built on the property, so near to Résonance Vineyard. We used the equipment because they were new, a new sorting table, a new distemmer, so you know we have to use, but the fruits were almost perfect, and the job on the sorting table was not too hard in 2018. So that give wine with a lot of concentration, a nice energy, elegance, but power. Maybe a good vintage, 2018, and with a big potential of aging. 2019, the season, you know, was a good season as well. I like the style of the 19. Well, the pressure of the mildew was a little bit higher, but well managed, and we were almost ready to pick, to harvest, and then we have seen some shower. So it seems it's something a little bit, I say normal, I don't know, but common in the Willamette Valley. You know, in Burgundy, it is a little bit the same. So something that we had to manage. I think the sorting, I agree with Scott, the sorting was one of the key of the vintage. So meticulous sorting. And then we had a lot of expression, you know, as today the wine are, on the tanks during the maceration. After the maceration, so aging in barrel during until May 2020, the wine were very close, tight, you know, and after the racking, we racked all the barrel after the malolactic degradation. That was really, the vintage was coming. And so I like the delicateness of the 19, something very elegant, you know, the fruits are very fresh. So as I told you, something very energetic, you know, expressive, but all these delicate notes as well, with a structure, with tannins, with a skeletons ready to bring the wine in good shape for aging. I think this is a vintage that would be very pleasant with this elegant touch, maybe that is at the front of the wine for the moment. But voilà, good vintage 2019.
Thank you. And Guillaume, I understand you have to leave a little bit early. So maybe we have
Yes, I apologize. So I am not in the Willamette Valley. I am in Los Angeles today, where I think the temperature are a little bit lower than in the valley. So it's like that. So voilà, I have unfortunately I have to leave at 12, so in a few minutes. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for coming all the way from Los Angeles to join us.
Pleasure.
So anybody else want to comment on the 2019 vintage, how they feel about it right now and how it'll be later? John, you want to say a word?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would say I love both vintages. If we're talking about 18 and 19 in comparison, I mean, yes, they're different, but I love them both. I mean, I feel like the 18 would probably have a little bit more of an attack, a little bit more of a spice component, a little more power, a little more brooding, a little bit broader shoulders than the 19. I mean, when I remember the 19, you know, the end of August, summer basically came to an abrupt end, and go right into September where we were in the low 60s, and then there was, you know, intermittent showers. And for me, as wine, I liked it. I was refreshed by that, you know, because it kind of was like the old days, I guess, you know, when, you know, you get to make wines that retained their acidity and came in at 22 bricks. And, you know, we had a little bit of pressure at the sorting table, but our fruit for the most part looked pretty good. But yeah, we had a few lots that needed a little more attention. Probably of 2019 being a vintage where, I mean, we don't use a lot of whole clusters here, but where I would steer away from that, probably because the stems weren't real lignified or ripe. But they're very different, but also I feel like they have both have the same amount of enjoyability or beauty. They're just in a different way. I mean, I feel like 18 reminds me of the 05s, and the 19 would probably remind me more of like 2010. So they remind me of other years, but both are very, very enjoyable. And, there's just a pretty elegance that I feel that the 19 has that I always equate with Oregon and cool climate Pinot Noir in general. Just very lovely wines that really show all the little nuances. And as you drink through the glass or the bottle, the wine evolves. It was quite lovely, quite beautifully. So, yeah, I mean, got nothing bad to say about 2019 vintage at all. I love the cooler vintages. I just always seem to gravitate more towards those. And as a winemaker, you get a little more challenge, and that's okay. That's fine. That's why we're here. That's what our job is. So, yeah. I mean, that's really what I got on that.
I think Moss had a word to say. Did you want to say something?
I was really inspired by what Guillaume said about elegance in this year. I think that in 2019, and I think it's reflective of what's best about Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir isn't a grape that needs to struggle with the hot weather, that needs to compete with that. It's a noble, properly noble grape, and it wants to be alive throughout the summer. And in a summer like 2019, as a grape grower, I can tell you, July was terrifying. We did have pressure in the Willamette Valley. We had rain day after day, and it was challenging. But the thing is, plants find the rain if they're healthy. And in fact, if they're healthy in the rain, they're going to be thriving. And all that biochemistry that's taking place is producing wines of real elegance. And at the same time, they're not drying out. So they're not producing this desiccated fruit at the end of the season, which, to be fair, is concentrated, but it's not the right kind of concentration. So to your question, Pat, about ageability, concentration isn't the thing. It's grace and freshness that produce a really ageable wine. And especially in the case of Pinot Noir, where it's not just the evolution of the chemistry, although that's super important. I think it's the falling away, like a sculpture, of the things that didn't need to be there. And so over time, with a really graceful Pinot Noir, like I really think this is, I'll tell you, you're going to have a wine of greater refinement, of greater ease, of greater elegance as it gets older. And I think 2019 is a great year for that. I think 2018, if you like really intense wines, if you like your Pinot with steak, get those 2018s. But if you want to collect Pinot, 2019 for sure.
Good point. Thank you. Robert, do you want to have the last word?
No, I actually don't. I actually like ongoing, continuing conversations. And I also, of course, liked, as you know, I really actually kind of like to be the person who kind of prods other people into talking about what their opinion's really based on. I'll tell you, so in our winemaking, because of the site, because of the concentration from the site, and Moss, I would love to get into a vintage vertical tasting with you sometime. Because I find that when you're looking at a whole series of vintages, all these different nuances, these different things come up in the wines, and you get these wines that appear to be so light and ethereal in their youth, but they pack real power. And I think that's really what's fascinating about a lot of the Willamette Valley wines. And particularly the Dundee Hill wines. And I'm thinking, John, of a couple of Torii wines that I had in there a long time ago, where you just got that incredible elegance that there's an underlying power to it. And I totally agree with you. I think that is more likely to happen, is more likely to be seen in a year like 2019. Frankly, we are just now releasing our 18s. We try to hold all of our wines in bottle. Bye, Guillaume.
Hi, Guillaume.
For a couple of years before we release. And so I'm starting to drink 18s now, and I can just tell you simply, I can't wait to get to the 19s. So the 19s are to me a much more interesting, much more fascinating wine. with a lot more potential. So I think I'm in sync with everyone on this on this call, that I think that the 19s have just a lot more potential with them. So that's my take. And by the way, I find one of the really fascinating differences from having made wine in Napa for all these years is how Napa winemakers, California winemakers freak out at the least little bit of rain. It's just so funny. You just, the phone calls, oh my God, what are you doing? It's such a relief. Because it's absolutely true. Grapevines, they don't give a damn about whether it's raining or not. It's just a stupid winemaker, right? I mean, we're the ones that just freak out and bring all this pressure to ourselves. And in Oregon, the way we farm for those rain events, because guess what? Historically, we've always gotten them. And so it's a much more relaxed, much more thoughtful approach to maturity that includes rain. And I have to tell you honestly, the 19 was just not a big deal, but it did allow for a longer, it allowed you to make better decisions about harvesting. And winemaking is so much about logistics that you always do a better job with the wines. And yeah, they demand a little more attention in those years. Guess what? That's good for the wines too. So I'm super excited about the 19 vintage. And I really can't wait to see what those wines taste like 5 years, 10 years from now.
Yeah, they're so reminiscent of some of the early vintages in Oregon that really put Oregon on the maps.
Thank you, Pat. Exactly.
Thank you, Robert. James, I don't think you got a chance to say, and we never did hear about your 16 varieties, but that may have to wait for another day. But any final word on the vintage?
On the 19 vintage, you know, my favorite thing, and something Scott said reminded me of this. 19 was our first vintage here at Abbey Road Farm, and I designed the winery to have an outdoor crush pad. I had never worked on an outdoor crush pad, but I thought it would be cool, and I thought it'd be amazing. And Scott's absolutely right. The shorts were put away super early. The crush pad didn't shield me from any of the sideways rain coming in, sorting fruit at 11 p.m. And all of that struggle made me love the vintage even more. Because like I said, in 18, a monk could have made wine, but 19, it was a struggle. And to what Robert has said, you know, they get more attention, but it's more rewarding when you see the final product about how exhausted you really were during those 6 or 8 weeks. So in that respect, and a romantic sort of standpoint, 19 is my favorite vintage since I've been here.
Okay, good note to end this conversation, right on time, really. And good note to take away for our audience. 2019, you're going to love these wines. Bid early, bid often. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank you, Pat.
Hope to see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
See you around.
Look forward to tasting all your wines.
See you later,
Yes.
guys.